Hello, my name is Csaba Fitzl, and I will talk about Beyond the Good Old Launch Agents and my 10 favorite macOS persistent techniques. This is supposed to be like a half an hour presentation, but Matt only gave me 15 minutes, so I think I cannot make it in 15 minutes, so it will be somewhere between the two. So let's jump in. A few words about myself. Right now, I'm the lead content developer of the macOS control bypasses training at Offensive Security. I'm also doing macOS bug hunting as a hobby. I used to be a red blue teamer for quite a long time. I have 2 kids married, and I really love to do hiking and trailering. So it's a pity that this conference is not live in the beautiful Vancouver in Canada, but hopefully next year. So this is the agenda. So these are the 10 persistent techniques I will talk about. But before I jump into that, just a brief intro. So back in 2014, Patrick Fardell gave a talk about malware persistence on macOS, and he collected the most well-known techniques used by malware. And actually, this is still holds today. So malware still uses these techniques mostly. But I was also fascinated by Adam, who goes by Hexacorn on Twitter, and he's serious about the Beyond the Good Old run keys, which covers over 100 persistent techniques for Windows. So I thought that I should probably do the same for macOS, because this is kind of cool. So again, macOS malwares, they use launch agents mostly, or launch demons. And I was wondering, can we do better? Are there any other options? And the answer is yes. So I started a blog post series about with very similar name to Adam's blog, and it goes by the Beyond the Good Old Launch Agent. And right now it has 29 parts, and I selected 10 of my favorite ones. So the first one is shell startup files. Shell startup files are executed when a shell environment is launched. So nowadays, ZSH is the default shell on macOS, but we still have bash, sh, and so on. All these shell environments execute various config files. So for example, zshrc, which is typically used for user configuration, bashrc for bash. There is also zshenv, zlogin, zlogout, which are executed when we log in and log out of a shell. There is a profile. And there are usually two variations of these. One for the user, which can be found in the user home directory, and there are global ones which can be found under the /etc directory on macOS. For example, etc/zshenv is one of them. Beyond these, what's interesting about these, the shell environment is, so it's typically executed when we launch terminal or if we SSH into macOS, but probably terminal is more common. And in that case, the shell environment will inherit terminal's privacy rights. So if we gave terminal any privacy exception, for example, full disk access, which I believe is very common between power users, the shell environment will inherit these rights, and we can potentially use it for like a TCC bypass. Also, if we find a way to overwrite one of these startup files, we can also escape the sandbox because terminal is not sandboxed. And how we can detect these modification or these persistence? Now, basically, we monitor for the change of the previous files. There might be many false positives, especially if we have power users in our environment, but it would still worth a try. Also monitoring for the chsh executable, which can change the default shell on an environment, can be interesting. And also the chbus executable, which can change user attributes for the shell environment. So yeah, I would monitor for this. Next one, pluggable authentication modules. Now, if these 10 techniques are my favorite, probably PEM is my favorite, and there will be another one also. What are these? They had an origin at Red Hat Linux. Basically, they can be used as to extend the authentication mechanism of the operating system. So these are pluggable authentication modules. So basically, it allows us to install third-party plugins. There are 4 facilities these plugins can cover. There is an authentication, auth for authentication, account for account management, session for session management, and password for password management. Password management is, for example, changing password. All of them have config files under the /etc pem.d directory. Since this facility can be found on most NICs system nowadays, this applies not only for macOS, but also other NICs system. The same goes for the previous one with the shell scripts. So let's check one of the config files, for example, sshd, which is the SSH configuration file. We have 3 columns. The first one is the facility, second one is the policy, and the last one is the actual module. The facility is, again, the authentication, auth, account, password, and session. And the policy is interesting because that defines how the result of the module will be processed. If it's required, then if that fails, then the entire result will fail. If it's optional, if there is a required policy, then this will be ignored. But if it's sufficient, if it succeeds, there will be no further calls. Basically, these entries are processed sequentially up, down. And there are 2 interesting default modules. One is the PEM permit, which basically provides a success for everything. And there is a PEM deny, which will deny everything similarly. So we can load our own module, as noted before. This is because all of these services like SSH, sudo, and so on have the CoreMapper private security clear library validation entitlement, so they are allowed to load third-party libraries. Or we can use one of the default one, for example, the PEM permit, if we need. There is a screenshot here for a PEM permit. Basically, this is how we can set up our module. Now, for detection, first of all, nowadays, these files are protected by DCC. So if you want to modify these, you will get a prompt that this application wants to administer your computer. And also, we need root to modify any of these files. Now, I think I would just monitor the change for these config files. I don't think these are frequently updated. So there might be some false positive when we install maybe a third-party module, but it shouldn't happen frequently. Also, with having endpoint security, there is the ES event type out mmap event, which we can use to monitor the load of various dilibs or basically modules. So we could monitor the load of dilibs into SSH, sudo, etc. We can use, for example, emond for gathering such logs. Next one is Hammerspoon. Now, this one is an application-specific persistence, so this is not a default macOS persistent techniques, and it's related to the Hammerspoon application. This is an automation application, and interestingly, this has a Lua script inside the home directory.hammerspoon directory called init.lua, and it will be executed when the application is launched. Now, this is a Lua script, which I don't find it so friendly to write, but we can just do an HS execute and provide a bash script there. But they have more examples on their website if you don't want to do like bash scripting. Hammerspoon bonus, I think it's also interesting for like DCC bypasses because Hammerspoon has many exception and potentially the user already provided rights for the application. For example, granting access to camera, microphone, address book, and so on. So if we can execute our script in Hammerspoon that That could be a nice DCC bypass at the same time. Detection, again, just change of the init.lua script or loop for weird child processes of this application. Next one, preference panes. Preference panes are basically all the modules or plugin in our system preferences, although I haven't checked macOS Ventura yet. Now it's called system settings. I guess it still uses the same plugin system. So basically, these are preference panes. We can add our own. Basically, these are just bundles, pref pane bundles. And if we populate the init with bundle function, then that will be invoked when someone clicks on these preferences. Now, these preference panes, like the modules we install, will be loaded by the legacy loader process, which doesn't really have any entitlements, only some disable library validation, so it can actually run third-party plugins, and that's all. So that's interesting for detection because we can also monitor for new files in the library preference panes directory, or we can monitor for modules loaded by the legacy loader process. So both of them could be used for detection of these preference panes. Next one is screensavers. This is pretty similar to prep panes. It was well documented by Leopold Doomfist before on his blog post. Screensavers are bundles with the .saver extension, and they are placed in the library screensavers directory. Now, this library screensavers directory can be found both on the global one and also in the user home folder. And it's very nice. Xcode has a template project for this, so we can just load that, basically create our own plugin very easily and install it. And it will be loaded by the legacy screensaver process. And unfortunately, it's sandbox, so if we are red teamers or malware, it's not a perfect solution because we run inside the sandbox with not too many rights. So if we want to use this, we probably will need a sandbox escape exploit as well. Detection, new files in the previously mentioned locations. Files, modules loaded by the legacy screensaver process, or basically any new saver bundle on the file system. So let's say someone downloads the .saver bundle, and let's say we don't want to allow people to install their own screensaver. We can just maybe delete or block access to those files right away before they even install it or place it in the right location. Color pickers is the next one. Now, I didn't know, this is some legacy stuff, but I didn't even know what are color pickers as it. So on the screen or on the slide, you can see a color picker. So basically, these are these small windows where you can select a color for your text, background, or whatever. These called color pickers. And apparently, you can create your own on macOS. And they can be found in the library color pickers directory, or you can install your own in these locations. These are also bundles and go with the .color picker extension. And they will be loaded by the legacy external color picker service process. And unfortunately for red teamers or malware, it's also sandboxed. So the same goes. So the same story as we had with the screensaver. So these are color pickers. I found many sample projects on GitHub from many years ago. I don't know how many people knew that you can do such thing on macOS. I found it pretty neat, actually. Detection, again, monitor for new files on the relevant directory, or new modules loaded by the legacy external color picker service, or any new color picker bundle. Maybe you don't want user to install such bundle, and similarly with the .saver bundles with screensaver, you can block these right away potentially. Next one, the 7th, periodic scripts. So PEM was one of my favorites, and periodic scripts are my other favorite persistence. Because I used to abuse it for exploitation. It's a pretty nice place to use for weaponization. So, but what are these scripts? They have a free BSD origin, I believe, and these are basically maintenance scripts found in the operating system, executed daily, weekly, and monthly, and each of them has their own launch daemon, so they will be run as root. The actual process will be periodic wrapper, and it will launch the USR as being periodic script. It's a bash script, and that script will basically go over all the periodic script location and execute them one by one. The scripts are located in the etc periodic directory, and there is a folder for each version, daily, weekly, and monthly. And it also has a config file in the etc defaults location. Now, the config file also defines the local scripts with the default location of USR local etc periodic. Now, this is interesting because if we had or have Homebrew installed on our system, which I think many power users will have, if not everyone, there was a local privilege escalation vulnerability up to Big Sur 11.5. And the reason for that is Homebrew sets the permission of this of the USR local directory to be writable by the default admin account. And with that, we could basically recreate this directory, drop our script there, and it will be executed as root by the system. And on macOS, going from admin to root is actually a privilege escalation vulnerability. Unlike on Windows, where you go from admin to system, is not, because on Windows, it's not a security boundary. On macOS, it is. Apple fixed it, and basically what they will do now is check the owner of the script and execute the script as that user. But not all is lost. If we still want to use this for weaponization, we have the 999.local script, which will look for scripts on more locations. So we can maybe create the etc/daily.local script, and regardless of the owner, it will be executed as root. So if in our exploit we can manage to drop a script file somewhere, this could be a nice place to do that. Now, as for detection, really monitoring for the change of all of these config files, because we can change the local script path in the config files, change of any of the scripts, any of the directories containing these scripts, or just check if there are any weird processes launched by the periodic scripts or the shell, basically. I think this can be baseline. So if we don't expect these periodic scripts to be changed, we can baseline what runs normally and whitelist those and move on. Next one, terminal preferences. Terminal, we can define a command in the terminal profile. So whenever we start up terminal, there is a command that will be executed when terminal is started, and it's inside its preferences, which can be found in library preferences directory. And if we check the plist, it's under the Windows settings, basic, and command string. This will be executed when terminal is launched. Detection, just look for the modification of this file. Next one, emond, the event Monitor Daemon. There has been lots of previous work by James Reynolds and Chris Ross on those. Really check out their post, because that will cover everything in really detailed. Basically, what we need here is the emond service doesn't run by default, but will be started when we drop a file in the private var db emond clients directory. And once there is any file there, it will start processing rules from the etc emond rules directory. And it can be also configured through the emond plist file. And we can specify additional rules location beyond the default one. This is an example rule which allows to the execution of a bash script, and basically it looks for the event type startup. So whenever emond is launched, it will execute the bash script defined in this plist file. Detection, I don't think that this is widely used service nowadays. So if there is any new file in the private VAR-DB emond clients directory that can be suspicious, any file there, change of the rules file because someone might add the new rules location there, or just look for any new or changed rules or child processes of emond. And the last one are folder actions. It has been detailed by Code Thomas before. Folder actions are scripts run by Finder when so this Finder will look for changed files or changed directories. We can define which one, and then it will execute a script whenever there is a change in the monitored location. The scripts are located in the library scripts folder action scripts directory, and the configuration is in the preferences directory. Now, the configuration is not really nice because it's a plist containing an embedded plist which contains another embedded plist with a really weird structure, what I didn't reverse. So if you want to do our own, basically what I would do is create a config file on your own Mac and deploy it on your target. That's the easiest. Now we can, normally you need user interaction to start these scripts or to actually set up folder actions, but we can also do it without user interaction. So first we create the script folder, we drop our script there, we create the directory which we want to monitor if needed. We create the directory, and then, as said before, we prepare our plist file with all the settings and drop it in preferences. Now, it will still not go into effect until we start the folder actions setup application. So we can just start the application. It will process the config file or the preference file and start the script if needed. And then we can kill the application. Also, if any of these scripts do any privacy related stuff, the prompt we get is related to folder action dispatcher, which means that we can kind of hide our script behind some legit macOS processes. Detection, look for any new scripts or change scripts, look for the change of the preference file, and the script will be launched by the COM Apple Foundation user script service process. So if it does launch anything weird, we can check that out. So conclusion, although malware still use launchd plist file nowadays, it might evolve, so we better prepare before malware does. So yeah, there are many unexplored options on macOS. These were just a few examples. If you are interested in more detail in any of these or any more persistent techniques, check my blog post. Yeah, and that was all. Thank you for listening. I couldn't fit into 15 minutes, so sorry, Matt. It became, I believe, 25. So yeah, we still have a few minutes for questions. Thank you for listening.